All right, here we go with another podcast of Why Real Estate, where we dig into the fundamentals of real estate and everything involved in the transaction process. We actually have a very important topic to discuss at this time, and as a guest, we've got Paul Gehring, owner and manager at Access Title. Often he jokes about how boring title is, but I've seen it enough now where it's absolutely so critical what's done in title that you just can't have a transaction, obviously, without it. If you do, you're breaking the law. But anyways, we're grateful he's here. Paul, you're the pro, you're the expert. Why title?
So I got into title about 20 years ago, not even having a clue what it was. Went in, a friend of mine got me a job, went in, learned it. Learned the importance of it. And so title insurance is going to protect buyers and sellers from defects in title. And I think it's a super important part of a real estate transaction, especially during that due diligence period for a buyer where they get to look at our title report and they get to see what items are out there recorded that affect that property, whether those are easements, right-of-ways, all kinds of things that that they may or may not know. Obviously, power line easements, you can see those, but what's under the ground, there could be sewer line easements and different things that you just don't know about. But when we search public records, we find all that stuff and disclose it, and so they can know what they're getting into when they buy that property.
And everything he mentioned directly affects value. Like it is absolutely critical to know and have the disclosure on all of that. Whether you're selling the property, if you're an owner and you don't realize you've got an easement, it's going to affect the value.
Right.
One way or the other, because maybe the easement's very useful and necessary. And if you're a buyer and you don't want people traipsing all over your property because there's an easement that shows up in title, it's going to matter. The value and perceived values is going to matter a ton. I mean, we've had situations where including not just easements and right-of-ways and different things, but also when clouds on title. Mm-hmm. We've ran across those types of issues. We recently found on a deal we were doing with you guys that the seller on a $380,000 condo had leaned $2.5 million against it.
Yes.
And he had completely forgotten about that.
Right.
Fortunately that's being removed actually this week. It has whatever we need to get in writing, but it's interesting the different things that matter that you want as a buyer, because it very much protects you.
Right.
So an owner will pay for a title insurance policy, right?
So when in a normal real estate transaction, the way the Utah Rep C is written, the seller pays for an owner's title insurance policy for the buyer. The buyer, if they're getting a loan, their lender will require a lender's title insurance policy, and that protects the lender and ensures their position on title. It's all about being in first position so that if they have to foreclose, they can foreclose. And in the event that the lender went to foreclose and there was some lien or something that wasn't found, then they fall back on that policy. And the owner's policy really just ensures that new owner that they're getting that home free and clear of liens, encumbrances, different things like that they have the right to then just enjoy their property and not have to worry about a defect in title. And there's so many different things that could pop up down the road, and that title insurance policy is good for as long as they own the home. It's a one-time payment and they never have to pay again. As long as they live there, they have that policy to fall back on.
So title is a heavily regulated industry.
Very heavy.
Very heavy, right? Why would you say that that's the case?
I think there's so much on the line, and we're asked to do a lot of things. I mean, on the one hand, like I talked about before, we research title and we present all of that to a potential buyer to show them what they're buying, what exists on that property. But the other thing we do is we handle all the money. So all the money that comes from a lender is wired into our trust account. If a buyer's bringing in a couple $100,000 to buy the home, that's wired into our trust account. And then we're responsible at funding to then send all that money out to where it's supposed to go, making sure that all the loans are paid off, liens are taken care of, realtors are paid, appraisers are paid, that everybody is paid the way that they're supposed to be. And I think that's one of the biggest reason there's so much regulation is we're handling millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, and I know you guys don't do anything unless it's in writing. Like
For
a pat on
sure.
the back and a thumbs up doesn't allow someone to
Doesn't work for us.
skim 10 grand anywhere, huh?
We want a paper trail.
You know, and part of the reason title's this way, if you remember the land rush back in the 1800s or whatever, when in Oklahoma they let people run and stake the ground with land, well, you can imagine the chaos that would ensue. Someone claims a piece of land and somebody else just comes along and decides, well, I'm going to claim that piece.
Right.
And then it doesn't get recorded, and then you have people selling property that doesn't even belong to them.
Right.
And there's countless stories of that in history. You know, fortunately, with the advancements in as we've evolved as a country, that's less and less likely to happen. But you still have those types of issues,
Right.
and they can come up.
Right. Yeah, there's issues we deal with, fence lines, fences being built that aren't necessarily on the property line. And
Encroachments.
yeah, and then someone has a survey done and finds out that the neighbor's fence is 5 feet into their yard. And so then you get into all kinds of, do we do a boundary line agreement to just acknowledge this as the boundary, or do they need to tear down their fence and move it 5 feet? There's all kinds of different things that pop up.
No, that's fair. So if you were to, any critical points about title that people should know?
I guess I would just say, for those, myself included, when I started at Access Title, I didn't know what a title company was. And I don't think that most people do know what a title company is or what we do. But just understand the importance of it. And we're there for a reason, to be a fiduciary and an unbiased third party, and make sure that the transaction is handled the way that we're instructed to do it in writing.
I know one of the very first things my team and I do when we get a signed listing agreement is we immediately send it over to, Paul and his team, and they start, doing a property report, to
Right.
let us know what is going on. And they're fantastic at letting us know if there are encumbrances, if there are encroachments, if there are liens and easements that we need to be aware of. And that's also helpful for the seller. And the seller, you want to know that in case somebody's tried to put
Right.
some sort of claim on your property.
Right. Someone could file a notice of interest or record a lien against your property for any number of things. And like that transaction you brought up earlier, that we found that, $2.5 million loan, and that seller had completely forgotten about it. So that's great to have those title searches done, as soon as you get the listing, so that we can address things like that if we need additional time to do it.
And on the other hand, it is also one of the first things that we request when we help a buyer go under contract on a property. I mean, it's okay with us. The seller has their property report that they've run through the title company they're working with, but we very much want a second set of eyes on it to find out if there's anything about this property that would make it so that the value isn't there, or the usefulness of it is not what it could be for a buyer who has expectations.
Yeah. This is just man, I don't know what you'd call it.
Nugget of wisdom.
Yeah, I guess let's call it a nugget of wisdom. I just recently attended the Utah Land Title Association convention. They have it twice a year. This one was up in Salt Lake. And one of the biggest things they talk about every time is wire fraud. So that would be my big tip to buyers and sellers. If you're a buyer and you're wiring in money for a closing, make sure that you check and double check the wire instructions. Call a known number to confirm them before you send the wire. Don't send them through email. It's just not safe anymore, unfortunately. Billions were lost last year because of email phishing and different scams like that. So that would be my last little nugget of wisdom.
Very wise. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, thank you.